It was a quiet afternoon when a thick envelope landed on my doorstep. I tore it open, expecting a simple notice, but instead, my eyes locked on a number that made my heart stop: $5,000 in HOA fines. My first reaction was disbelief. $5,000? For what? I had meticulously followed every rule. My lawn was trimmed, my mailbox painted, and my driveway clear. I replayed every interaction in my mind, trying to find the mistake, the tiny infraction that could possibly justify such an outrageous demand. But there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. The letter was formal, stamped with the HOAS logo, threatening additional fines, legal action, and even liens if payment wasn't made immediately. The words blurred as panic crept in. I felt a wave of anger, confusion, and fear all at once. Could they actually take my home over this? I had neighbors who spoke of the HOA as a strict enforcer of rules, but this felt different: excessive, unfair, and terrifying. I considered my options. Paying was out of the question. I hadn't broken any rules. Ignoring the notice felt risky. What if they escalated? My curiosity got the better of me. I decided I needed the truth, not just the threats on paper. I needed to see the documents, the approvals, and any evidence they had to justify this staggering fine. The first step was calling the HOA office. A polite, yet firm, voice on the other end assured me they were simply enforcing the rules. But the way she avoided specifics made my instincts tingle. Something didn't add up. There was a hidden story behind this $5,000 figure, and I intended to uncover it. That night, I reviewed the letter over and over, noting dates, signatures, and references to rules I had never heard of. Each line deepened my suspicion: this was not just enforcement, it was intimidation. I made a decision: I would dig into every record, every meeting note, every vote the HOA had ever held. I would uncover what they were hiding, no matter how long it took. Little did I know, what I was about to discover would turn the tables completely. The same organization that had threatened me with thousands in fines was about to face the consequences of their own mistakes. The next morning, I drove to the HOA office, my mind racing. I had prepared a notebook, pen, and a list of every question I could imagine. The front desk receptionist greeted me politely, but her eyes held a flicker of apprehension. It was clear I wasn't the first homeowner to challenge them, but I intended to be the one who found the truth. I requested all meeting minutes, voting records, and correspondence related to fines issued over the past 5 years. The clerk hesitated but eventually handed over stacks of papers, some neatly filed, others barely legible. As I flipped through the documents, patterns began to emerge: dates that didn't match, missing signatures, and repeated references to rules that were either vague or non-existent. At first, I couldn't believe it. Could an organization so formal and authoritative operate with such disarray? My hands shook as I realized the implications. Many fines had been issued without proper approval, and some board members had acted beyond their authority. The more I read, the more outrageous it became. It wasn't just me. Neighbors' fines were scattered across different years, and each followed the same irregular process. I jotted down every anomaly, creating a timeline of questionable fines. Every missing signature and unexplained rule citation added fuel to my growing sense of vindication. But the real turning point came when I stumbled upon a buried document that seemed inconsequential at first glance. It was a simple board resolution from 3 years ago, stipulating that all future fines required a majority vote by the board members in office. I reread it multiple times, heart pounding. Comparing it with the fines in front of me, the truth became undeniable: the fines against me and others had been issued without legal authority. Every threat, every demand for payment, every late fee, they were all invalid. The power the HOA wielded was based on assumption, not law. I leaned back, astonished. This discovery wasn't just a loophole, it was a weapon I could use to hold them accountable. But I knew I needed more proof that could not be ignored. Copies of every irregular fine, every missing signature, and the key resolution document would be my arsenal. I realized I was standing on the brink of something huge. The same organization that had intimidated me could now be exposed for its own mismanagement. All that remained was to plan the next move carefully. I began organizing the documents meticulously. Every fine I had received was paired with evidence showing missing approvals or contradictory rules. Notes in the margins highlighted irregularities, dates didn't match, and signatures were absent. My strategy was simple: present undeniable proof in a clear, logical manner. I knew that the board thrived on confusion and intimidation, so clarity would become my weapon. Next, I consulted a local attorney familiar with HOA regulations. I laid out everything: the fines, the missing approvals, the discrepancies, and asked for guidance. She confirmed my suspicions: the HOA's actions were not only unjust but legally vulnerable. She explained how I could challenge the fines effectively, citing the resolution that required a majority vote. My anxiety began to shift into determination. While reviewing the documents again, I noticed a pattern: almost every homeowner who had questioned a fine experienced similar intimidation tactics. It became clear this wasn't an isolated incident, it was a systemic issue. My goal evolved beyond just defending myself. I wanted to bring transparency and accountability to the entire neighborhood. With a plan forming, I drafted a formal letter to the HOA. I referenced each fine, the missing approvals, and attached copies of supporting documents. The tone was firm but professional, emphasizing the legal requirements they had violated. I knew this letter could rattle them. It had the potential to challenge their authority and force them to respond. That evening, I imagined their reactions. The same people who had sent threatening letters were now about to receive evidence proving they had overstepped their bounds. It was a role reversal I had never anticipated when the first $5,000 fine landed on my doorstep. I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. I realized this confrontation was more than just about money, it was about justice, fairness, and proving that even a small homeowner could stand up to a powerful board. The next morning, I would deliver the letter, initiating a chain of events that would completely change the dynamics in my neighborhood. The next morning, I carefully delivered my formal letter and copies of the evidence to the HOA office. I handed it to the receptionist, who looked at me with a mix of surprise and apprehension. "This will be reviewed," she said curtly, sliding the documents onto a cluttered desk. But I could sense the tension in the office. It was subtle but undeniable. Something had shifted. Within hours, I began receiving emails from board members requesting clarifications, dates, and explanations. The tone of the correspondence was noticeably defensive, a stark contrast to the previous threatening letters. I noticed small signs of panic: vague excuses, contradictory statements, and repeated requests to schedule meetings. The same people who had wielded authority so confidently were now navigating uncertainty, forced to respond to concrete evidence. Neighbors soon learned of my actions. A few reached out privately, sharing their own experiences with unjust fines and aggressive enforcement. Their stories mirrored mine: missing signatures, phantom rules, and fines without approval. This confirmed that the problem wasn't isolated, it was systemic. With my evidence in hand, these homeowners began discussing collective action. Suddenly, my individual challenge had the potential to inspire a neighborhood-wide movement. The board's tone changed with each communication. Emails became defensive, phone calls were curt, and meetings were scheduled at short notice. It was evident that my meticulously documented evidence had shaken them. Every missing signature and every violation of procedure I had highlighted forced them to justify actions they had previously assumed were unquestionable. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically. During a tense board meeting, I presented my findings formally. I went line by line, showing the timeline of fines, missing approvals, and the crucial board resolution requiring majority votes for fines. Members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some whispering to each other, clearly aware of the vulnerability I had uncovered. Their attempts at intimidation now faltered under the weight of documented facts. By the end of the meeting, it was clear, the same board that had sought to instill fear in residents was facing its own reckoning. The atmosphere in the room had changed. I had not only defended myself but exposed a systemic flaw that affected multiple homeowners. The fines were no longer a threat, they were evidence of mismanagement. After the board meeting, I realized I held a unique advantage. The fines they had used to intimidate me were now weapons against them, documented and undeniable. I began strategizing how to leverage this evidence not only to remove my own fines but to hold the HOA accountable for its systematic mismanagement. I started by compiling a comprehensive report, combining all the irregularities I had found: missing approvals, contradictory rules, expired board terms, and unfair fines. I highlighted the resolution that required majority votes for fines, showing that the board had no legal authority to impose them. Every detail was precise, every discrepancy documented. This report would serve as undeniable proof if the situation escalated further. Meanwhile, I discreetly communicated with neighbors who had faced similar fines. Their support was crucial. Together, we formed a small coalition, sharing documents and experiences. Each homeowner added weight to the evidence. What was once my personal battle became a community effort, turning isolated cases into a collective challenge. Their encouragement strengthened my resolve. This was bigger than just my own home. With everything prepared, I scheduled a follow-up meeting with the board, ensuring that all evidence would be on display. The goal was clear: force acknowledgement of their mismanagement and secure the cancellation of every unjust fine. As I walked into the meeting room, the tension was palpable. The same people who had once acted with authority now seemed unsettled, uncertain how to respond to the growing weight of facts. During the presentation, I methodically went through every violation and misstep. The board tried to interrupt, but the coalition of homeowners kept them in check, demanding answers. Witnesses, documents, and timelines left no room for evasion. Slowly, it became clear that their attempts to intimidate had backfired completely. The tables had been turned. By the end of the session, the board conceded on several points. They agreed to retract fines, review all processes, and ensure legal compliance moving forward. The collective effort had exposed their flaws, and accountability was no longer optional. What had begun as a $5,000 threat had now transformed into a demonstration of justice, unity, and persistence. After the confrontation, the board seemed rattled. Emails poured in, some defensive, some apologetic, but all carried a tone of panic. Their previous confidence had evaporated, replaced by uncertainty and tension. They were no longer the ones dictating terms, now they were reacting to every move I made. The $5,000 fines that once intimidated me had become the symbol of their failure. The following week, I received a formal notice: the board intended to review all fines issued in the past 3 years. While on the surface this seemed like a procedural step, it was clear they were scrambling to cover their mistakes. Internal discussions and whispered meetings were happening behind closed doors, but now, their actions were being monitored closely by multiple homeowners. I continued to communicate with neighbors, who shared any suspicious correspondence or unexplained fines. Each piece of information added another layer to our collective evidence. The board had underestimated the power of documentation and community. What they had assumed would be isolated, invisible mistakes was now a trail of undeniable proof against them. Determined to maintain pressure, I sent a follow-up letter highlighting additional discrepancies, including fines issued to homeowners whose board approvals had expired. I emphasized the legal requirement of majority votes, reminding them that non-compliance could result in formal complaints and legal challenges. The language was firm but professional, leaving no room for ambiguity. As the days passed, the board grew more defensive. Phone calls were abrupt, and emails carefully worded, revealing their unease. They attempted to regain control, offering settlements and partial fine reversals to homeowners, but we held our ground. Our coalition had learned that giving in too soon could weaken the impact of our evidence. During a particularly tense meeting, one board member openly admitted, "We didn't realize how serious this was." That statement, while small, was monumental. The admission confirmed that the board now recognized the power shift. The same organization that had threatened me with thousands of dollars had lost its authority, and I could see the fear in their eyes. By the end of the week, it became evident, the board's credibility was eroding. The fines, once a tool of intimidation, had become their undoing. Homeowners now demanded transparency, and the board was forced to comply, signaling a major victory. With the board visibly shaken, it was time to ensure that accountability wasn't just temporary. The coalition of homeowners and I decided to formally document every violation, misstep, and illegal fine. This record would leave no room for ambiguity and serve as a permanent record should any further disputes arise. The goal was simple: make sure the HOA could never use fear as a weapon again. I organized the evidence into a clear, professional report. Each section highlighted missing approvals, expired board terms, and fines issued without legal authority. Screenshots of correspondence, copies of letters, and official bylaws were meticulously attached. The report was over 100 pages, but every detail mattered. This was no longer a personal fight, it was a blueprint of accountability for the neighborhood. Next, we presented the report to the HOA during a scheduled public meeting. The atmosphere was tense. The same board members who had once waved authority arrogantly were now defensive and visibly anxious. Homeowners followed my lead, asking pointed questions and referencing the documented discrepancies. With each question, the board's attempts at evasion crumbled. It became evident, their intimidation tactics had failed. The board finally agreed to several key changes. All previous fines issued without proper approvals were formally retracted. Policies were revised to ensure legal compliance, and a neutral review committee was introduced to oversee future fines. It was a systemic correction, not just a personal victory. Homeowners were empowered, and the culture of fear that had pervaded the community was replaced with transparency and fairness. But the final twist came when one board member admitted privately, "We didn't think one homeowner could uncover all this." That admission was symbolic. It highlighted the impact of knowledge, preparation, and courage. The $5,000 fine that had once threatened me became the catalyst for transforming the HOA entirely. As I walked home after the meeting, I reflected on the journey. Fear had initially consumed me, but research, preparation, and determination turned the tables. The secret I uncovered, the procedural loophole and the board's expired authority, was the key that shifted power from intimidation to justice. This chapter marked a turning point. Not only were the fines eliminated, but the HOA had also been forced to rebuild credibility and trust with the community. What began as a personal fight had now become a landmark example of how knowledge and courage can challenge authority. Word of the board's missteps spread quickly through the neighborhood. Homeowners who had silently suffered under unfair fines now felt empowered. Conversations shifted from frustration to action, with many thanking me for uncovering the truth. What started as my personal battle had ignited a community-wide awakening. Neighbors began sharing stories of their own fines, each more absurd than the last. Late fees for non-existent infractions, claims of rule violations that didn't exist, and repeated harassment, all were documented and cross-referenced with the evidence I had already collected. The realization hit the board hard: their authority had been undermined, and the neighborhood was united against procedural abuse. Social dynamics in the community changed almost overnight. The same homeowners who had previously avoided confrontation now attended HOA meetings with confidence. They were prepared, informed, and assertive. The coalition I had quietly formed became a force that demanded transparency, ensuring no board member could issue fines without proper documentation or a majority vote. Some board members attempted to regain control by implementing stricter language in newsletters or intimidating new residents. But their efforts were now transparent, easily challenged, and publicly recorded. The power they had once wielded through fear was gone, replaced by accountability and oversight. Every document I had uncovered now served as protection for the entire neighborhood. Local media caught wind of the situation after a resident posted about the $5,000 fines and the secret discovery online. A reporter visited, interviewing homeowners and documenting the board's failures. Coverage highlighted how one determined individual could hold authority accountable, a story that resonated far beyond our community. Suddenly, the neighborhood's ordeal became a cautionary tale for other HOAs. Amid the public attention, the board had no choice but to implement long-term reforms. Policies were rewritten, fines could only be issued with full documentation, and a neutral oversight committee was established. Residents regained trust, knowing that the threat of arbitrary fines had been eliminated. Reflecting on the ripple effect, I realized the impact extended beyond my own victory. By uncovering a single procedural loophole and presenting the facts clearly, I had transformed not just my own situation, but the entire community's relationship with its governing body. The once feared HOA was now accountable, and homeowners finally felt secure. The final chapter of this ordeal was not just about winning, it was about transforming the culture of our community. With the fines retracted, policies rewritten, and a neutral oversight committee in place, the HOA had no remaining leverage. Their threats, once terrifying, were now powerless. Homeowners breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that fairness and transparency had finally been restored. I reflected on the journey from the moment the $5,000 fine arrived. Initially, fear and anger consumed me. But instead of giving in, I chose to investigate, document, and challenge the board systematically. Each step requesting records, uncovering missing approvals, and discovering the pivotal board resolution built the foundation for the ultimate victory. It was meticulous work, but it proved that preparation and persistence can overcome intimidation. Neighbors now approached me with gratitude and admiration. Many admitted they had felt powerless under the board's authority, but my actions inspired them to stand up for their rights. The coalition we formed remained active, monitoring compliance and ensuring that the new policies were enforced. This experience had united a previously fragmented community, transforming fear into empowerment. The board, once confident and aggressive, was forced to acknowledge the mistakes publicly. Some members resigned, unable to face the scrutiny, while others adapted to the new rules. The shift was permanent. Authority was no longer about intimidation but accountability. Residents had reclaimed their voice, and the community's governance was now rooted in law and fairness rather than arbitrary power. Personally, the ordeal taught invaluable lessons. Fear often comes from the unknown, but knowledge and preparation are powerful antidotes. One document, one resolution, had the power to destroy the authority of an entire board when leveraged correctly. Courage, combined with careful strategy, proved far stronger than any threat or intimidation tactic. Even months later, I received messages from other neighborhoods and homeowners asking how I had achieved this. The story became a blueprint for standing up to unfair authority, showing that no individual or organization is beyond accountability. The $5,000 fine, which initially seemed like a personal disaster, became a catalyst for systemic change, proving that justice is achievable with perseverance. As I closed this chapter, the takeaway was clear: knowledge is power, preparation is key, and community solidarity transforms fear into strength. The $5,000 fine had tried to intimidate me, but the secret I uncovered turned the tables completely, leaving the HOA powerless and the community stronger than ever.